So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is Jennifer Peck. I'm from the Partnership for Children and Youth, and I want to welcome you to the first of our summer game plan series for 2022. We are so glad that you chose to be with us today. And I also want to say Happy New Year to everyone and just acknowledge that 2022 has not started exactly the way we had all hoped. We know it is really, really challenging out there for our students and our educators and our families, no matter where you sit across the state. But we are hopeful that spending some time thinking about summer and all of the inspiration that summer learning can bring will be a bright spot for you as we navigate the coming months together. I want to highlight that you will hear us always use the term summer learning as opposed to summer school, because we need to think about summer as a time and a space that's about much more than just remediation. And it's about much more than just recovering credits or catching up on content. And catching up is important, of course, but summer also offers these incredible opportunities for creative, hands-on, engaging activities and exploration for both our students and our educators. And when summer is designed comprehensively with the whole child in mind, it's really proven to support academic growth, social emotional growth, and also student engagement, which is so urgent right now. And for the first time ever, funding is not a barrier to making this happen. Last spring, as you know, we saw big investments in summer learning begin to happen across the country, but particularly here in California. And this year, we're likely to see even more. Just yesterday, the governor's new budget proposal came out, which is proposing billions more for after school and summer programs than we even have had for this year. And we know that with all of this investment comes a lot of overwhelm around how to get new programs up and running. And our job through this series that you've joined in with here today is to help you figure that out so that we can really maximize this opportunity in front of us. So again, thank you for being with us. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alea Rosario from the Partnership for Children and Youth to get us started on our program for the day.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And thanks for being here. Again, my name is Alea Rosario, and we will a little bit later today be introduced to our partners who have helped us to think about and prepare for this session from the Sperling Center for Research and Innovation. I also want to just welcome a few additional colleagues at PCY who are here supporting. We have Corey, who's running our technical background piece. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out over the chat. And then later you'll be able to hear from our colleagues, Jen Dietrich and Ben Nash, or be able to interact with them a little bit later. And just to also, reiterate some of the resources that Jennifer mentioned, this session, next slide, is a part of our summer game plan series and a series of workshops. Today, we're going to focus on some of the foundations of planning and what can get you starting to think early in your planning process, and or if you've already begun, hopefully be able to leave with some additional tools and ideas. Our next session or future opportunities coming up to advance your planning process is actually next week. There is an Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Planning Workshop. It's hosted by our partners at the California After School Network and CCEE. That focus will be on broader, areas of expanded learning. We will be offering a session on summer during that session, so feel free to check that out. I think I saw Heather join, and so if you want to share any more, Heather, about that event in the chat, please feel free. And then future sessions within this summer game plan series are later this month. Our partners at Sperling Center for Research and Innovation will join us again to really think about how we involve partners intentionally in this planning process. And then save the date. We will send out for our February session, which will focus on the big challenge that we know everyone is facing around staff recruitment, and introduce you all to some potential partners and strategies to be able to navigate that challenge. Next slide. And so today, we're going to be sort of starting with kind of a grounding in what we know about what makes up a quality summer learning program. There's years of work that, has told us what quality looks like. Of course, in the context of the pandemic, we've had to adjust and shift. And so we'll start with sort of a grounding of what we know, and particularly what we saw last year that could inform our planning. We'll get a sense from you all where you all are in the planning process, wherever that is, just to get a sense of where your peers are. We'll be then introduced to some of those foundational tools and concepts and ideas around planning, and then we'll move into breakout discussions so that you can interact with your peers across the state, ask questions of our guests here, to advance your planning process, and then we'll have a reflection and close. And just to note that this format of both sharing information and sharing knowledge and hearing from field practitioners as well as experts, and then getting into breakout discussions, is the model that we plan for this summer game plan series, so that you can both leave with tools and have some time, to work through day-to-day real-time challenges with your peers. A few reminders about technology. We'll ask you to use our Zoom kind of resources to engage. So raise your hand if you have a question that you feel it would be helpful to share verbally. Otherwise, use the chat box. Think of the chat box as a place to share aha moments, encourage or respond to others, or ask questions as well. And then we will, during our breakout sessions, really lean on you all to engage and to interact with one another during that time. And so we're going to start out with a quick poll, and we'll use Poll Everywhere throughout the session. So once you open up the poll for the first time, you may want to leave it open because we want to hear from you all. And so our first couple of questions, we're going to start with what type of organization you represent. And so the link to the poll will be in the chat in just a moment. We have a sense of who is in the room with us today. All right, so lots of school districts, which is fantastic. We have community-based organization partners, our expanded learning provider partners, some technical assistance providers, a few county. If you selected other, please let us know in the chat what type of organization you represent. All right. So good number of school districts, charters, which is fantastic. We have both expanded learning partners as well as TA providers. So we should have a good enriching dialogues across these different representatives. Great. And so our next poll at this time, we want to know, what is your experience offering summer learning programs? So we're going to ask you to select one. Is this your first time offering summer learning this upcoming summer? Have you run summer programs for the last 1 to 3 years? 3 or more years? If other, please share in the chat. So looks like we have good experience running summer programs. So 3 or more years of summer program is by far the majority. A few, this will be their first time offering summer programming, maybe a few 1 to 3 years. And again, if other, please let us know what your other is. And so this gives us a good sense, that we're talking to folks that have some experience here and we want to make sure that we're leaning on you all and your experiences as we're looking at what effective planning looks like. And also to make sure that our friends here that have run summer program for 1 to 3 years or are newly running a summer program for the first time leave with some really tangible tools. All right. Okay, thanks for participating in those polls. Once again, we'll have several more poll questions throughout, which really helps us kind of think about what kinds of supports are needed. So we're going to spend just a few minutes, as I mentioned before, kind of getting grounding in what we know about quality summer learning. And Jennifer mentioned this at the beginning, but we want to just be really clear that when we're talking about summer learning programs, we're talking about programs that combine academics with this whole child development lens to create learning opportunities that look and feel a lot more like what you would see in summer camps versus traditional summer school, which might be remedial or even punitive in years past. Next slide. And so a good kind of holistic view of quality comes from this report, Every Summer Counts, that was informed by this National Summer Learning Project. It's the largest, most comprehensive study of summer learning programs that's ever been done. It was launched back in 2011 and really sought to understand what implementation factors and what effectiveness did voluntary summer learning programs have, and also what it takes to achieve quality. And so within this study, there were 5 school districts that were part of a Wallace Foundation funded National Summer Learning Project initiative. And the study was conducted over 8 years. And next slide. The programs that participated in this study had some common elements that were informed by existing research, and I think are good factors to consider when we're talking about what makes a quality program. First, that they're no cost, full day programs that ran for 5 to 6 weeks. They combined academics and enrichment, that class sizes were smaller and had fewer students, that there were certified teachers that focused on about 3 hours of academics per day, and that meals and transportation were provided. And so these common elements, right, again, were informed by research, and ultimately, the results were that high attenders, that students who attended 20 days or more, and repeat attenders really reaped the most benefits. You can go to the next slide. After one summer, students that had high attendance outperformed the control group in math. And after the second summer, high attenders saw advantages in math, language arts, and social emotional learning that persisted through the following spring. And so overall, the recommendations that came out of this report indicate that the amount and the quality of instruction influence the amount of academic benefit that attenders received from the program. And so this idea of ensuring sufficient duration and attendance in the program is a really important factor when considering quality. The benefits, as I mentioned, were greatest for the students who attended consecutive summers and who had strong attendance during those summers. And so as we're planning, we should consider one, how do we plan for a summer that runs for 5 to 6 weeks? And how do we ensure and plan that students will attend regularly? And we can do that by making attendance expectations really super clear, but also intentionally creating and ensuring that we are planning for engaging programming that students want to attend, and that have a positive climate for students. Next slide, please. The other important finding is that the quality of instruction had important influence on quality. And so, that means that we need to think about how we use time, how we think about good scheduling from the start, that we're making sure that logistics are all thought through so that there isn't time sort of wasted on having to address logistical challenges as much as we can once the summer program starts. To leverage community partners to offer enrichment. One of the benefits that came from this report were that students were exposed to new experiences and had new opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. And so our community-based partners are really important and critical to being able to offer these things. Oftentimes, community-based partners have stronger connections and relationships with youth that can be leveraged and can help reduce some of the pressures on capacity, right, by leaning on some of our community-based partners to provide that type of programming during the summer. And the other important factor around quality instruction is, when possible, to engage and hire certified teachers with the relevant experience to provide some of the academic offerings. And so taken together, these findings reveal that well-planned, high-quality summer learning programs can produce meaningful benefits for students, especially for those with high rates of attendance and consecutive summer attendance during consecutive summers. Next slide. And what was exciting is that many of you probably have seen our report that we released just in the fall, which captured a pretty comprehensive view of about 24 communities across the state of what happened during summer, just this last summer in 2021. And what we saw was that there were a variety of types of summer learning programs offered: academic, social emotional learning, wellness, and that some of these key factors happened regardless of the type of summer program that was offered. And so districts prioritize student engagement, social emotional learning, and mental health. And we know that that's what students needed, and that's what communities offered. Next slide. Additional promising practices that we saw from this last summer were that districts and communities prioritize the students who needed it most. And that was based on the context of the community, right? So looking at student data, looking at what our students need, influence the type of programming that was offered, and that should continue to ensure that we're designing the program to meet those needs of our students. Again, we saw smaller class sizes, we saw project-based learning, and we saw intentional curriculum that helped to build students' skills. And this graph on the left-hand side, showed a variety of the kind of enrichment opportunities that were provided, again, which varied based on community and what the students as well as the staff's interests were. Another important kind of promising practices that we saw was that districts and communities really relied on partnerships to expand capacity. And as I mentioned, we're going to actually dive into this partnerships piece during our next workshop, but really thinking creatively about what kinds of capacity is needed and what partners are available to play that role or be in support of those roles. And then finally, a promising practice that we saw last summer was to really look at summer as a space to provide PD for staff, both certified teachers as well as our community-based organization that had year-round benefits, and that we know we need to be creative around staffing, as I mentioned before, which we'll cover in another future workshop. And so all that to say, it was really exciting to see that despite all of the challenges that we're facing in education today, that last summer, there were some really creative, innovative offerings that children and youth had exposure to and access to that really builds on the years of research that we have around what makes up a quality program. And Marcy, I see the question in the chat, and regarding the program duration, that's more. I actually don't know that question, the answer to that question, if there were negative impacts based on the program being offered more than 6 weeks. If our partners over at SPRI know the answer, please feel free. But we can certainly share the report with you all as well to take a dive into that. Yeah, Brenda.
Yeah, Alea, thanks for the question, Marcy. I believe that all of the programs that were a part of the National Summer Learning Project were 5 to 6 weeks, so they may not have the data on whether or not there were different effects for programs that were longer.
Yeah. Great. All right, so thanks for the question. And again, please feel free to drop in other questions. But we're going to launch another poll and ask a series of questions to you all. And we want to get a sense of sort of where you are in your planning for summer. And it's okay if you're still in the process of figuring out your responses to these questions. But we want to get a sense, and so that you all can see as well where your peers are at. So our first question, we already see responses around what kinds of offerings are you planning, and you can select all that apply. Let me make my screen bigger so I can see. All right, so we see a variety of offerings. How exciting. We see STEM and STEAM up there, enrichment, fantastic. Some bridge programs, which is a huge opportunity to think about how expanded learning and time during summer can support those transitions. All right, and once again, feel free if you selected other to let us know in the chat. And then our next question is around youth outcomes. So using 1 to 2 words, describe what kinds of youth outcomes that you hope to achieve. And this will build a word cloud. So it works best if you, write in 1 to 2 words, submit. You can then submit in another 1 to 2 words. But let us know, what kind of youth outcomes do you hope to achieve? Great. So one example is that students are healthy. Students are building community. Great. All right, we see some coming in. Fun, engagement, experiences, maybe new experiences to build community, which is so important. We know that children and youth need spaces to connect and build community with one another. Fantastic. I see attendance, impact, exploration, self-esteem, positive, healthy relationships. Fantastic. We'll leave this question up for 1 to 2 more seconds to get those last responses in. All right. So what a great kind of snapshot, right, of the kind of youth outcomes that we hope to achieve over the next summer. And they're still coming in. Creative, active, a fantastic place we're in, right? So it's important to think about and to make clear what outcomes we're hoping to address. All right, we will move on to our next question. Thank you for participating in this. What student groups do you plan to serve in your summer program? And once again, you can select all that apply. Disengaged students could be students that are below grade level, maybe didn't enroll in kindergarten during the school year, high school students that need extra credits. You see all of the above. Great. Some are planning to offer the program to all students in the district, students from low-income families. Great. And so another good exercise, right, to really clarify who we plan to serve and the needs of these specific student groups should be integrated, right, into your planning, into your program design, into your outreach, and so on. Fantastic. All right, and we have one more question, I believe, maybe 2 more questions. What grade levels do you plan to serve this summer? So elementary or middle school age, high school, you can select all of the above. All right, we see some adjusting. Okay. And this is great to see as we know that our older students are have been left out in some of this funding, and summer is a great opportunity to ensure that we're designing and engaging our older youth in this opportunity. Great. All right, and this is our last question in terms of where you are in your planning. How many students do you plan to serve in your summer program? So less than 100, somewhere between 100 and 250, 250 to 500. All right, that response came in quick. All right, we're adjusting a little bit. Okay. So 1,000 plus, 100 to 250. All right, we're evening out a little bit. Fantastic. And again, we know that it is January. There's a lot more to do around planning, and even some of these plans could shift slightly. But thank you for letting us know kind of what your plans are now. And I'm going to turn it over to our friends at the Sperling Center for Research and Innovation to go through some foundational ideas around planning.
Thanks so much, Alea. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. And it was great to see in all of the polls just how many decisions have already been made so far. Really, kudos to everyone on the call for, the great work that's gone into summer learning already. So before we jump in, just want to take a moment to introduce ourselves a little bit on the next slide. So myself, Jess, and my colleagues, Paige and Brenda, are all part of the Sperling Center for Research and Innovation. And Corey, can we go to the next slide, please? And so also known as SCRI, if you don't want to, it's a little bit of a mouthful, so you can just call us SCRI. But we are an affiliate of Bell Excel, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports youth programming. And essentially what we do is our goal is to take the research and evidence that is out there in the field and really think about the practical application for LEAs as well as community-based organizations, really thinking about how we are supporting sharing knowledge and best practices, improving outcomes, optimizing quality, and really strengthening the systems that impact the youth that we serve around the country. And so it's been wonderful to be able to partner with PCY in supporting these webinars and bring some of that information to you all. So right now I'm going to, as we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Paige to talk a little bit about what the research says on really effective strategies when it comes to summer learning.
All right, so hello everybody, my name is Paige. Brenda has put a link into the chat on the study that we're going to be referencing. Alea kind of talked about the RAND Corporation and their summer learning finding as it pertains to students. And then they also created some work and research around getting to work on summer learning, which outlines best practices for high quality summer learning programs. Of the practices identified, you will notice that we have bolded here is early planning, which is one of the reasons why we are here. We all know that sometimes summer planning doesn't really start as early as January, but we're here today because that was one of the most important findings in high quality summer programs. Of the practices, there are also some other key areas of focus that the study has found. For example, along with early planning, it's really, really important to consider a cross-departmental planning team, having a lot of different stakeholders involved in the planning of the summer learning program. When you're thinking about teacher selection, hiring teachers with relevant content knowledge and grade level experience. And if it's possible, we know in the time of COVID, this can be tough, but trying to find the staff that's motivated for summer learning, who might have new and creative ideas that they can bring into the mix that you may not be able to use during the school year session. The use of time, time on task, make sure that you have those adequate transition times scheduled in your daily and your master schedules so that you can utilize that academic time more effectively. When it pertains to academic curriculum, making sure that you, especially now, making sure that you take some of the stress off of the teachers, make sure that you have high quality materials that are scope and sequence and are defined and are ready to go and implement for your summer staff instead of trying to design those during the summer session, having them ahead of time and ready to go. Enrichment activities, if you want, being careful to plan enrichment and see and make sure that it's integrated with academics and that you have those content specific experts with your enrichment activities, whether they're community partners or whether they're employees within the school district. Positive climate. This one was really important. One of the drivers for attendance, and this is important in a voluntary summer learning program, knowing that it's not mandatory, is having a positive climate and being intentional on how to integrate that into your program planning would be beneficial in the planning process. And of course, program costs, knowing that staff is one of the biggest costs in summer learning, making sure that you understand those program costs and that you're walking through and you're outlining your budget and your program costs and using templates that are available in places like the summer learning toolkit that is one of those summer learning budgets that you can have. So these were some of the areas of focus that the study focused on. And now I will give it back to my colleague, Jess Banks, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Paige. And so on the next slide, when we think about, we're zooming in today on planning, because as Paige mentioned, it was not only recognized as one of the most effective practices that lead to those quality summer learning experiences, but it really is the engine that drives the entire quality improvement process. So it's step one, and it's going to be involved. You are going to be planning all the other steps during this stage. So really thinking about, what are those goals? What are those components? How does that impact the way that you are training and engaging staff, as well as engaging partners, which we'll talk more about at our next webinar later this month. Another thing, how are you implementing? So we know that, it seems like a no-brainer, we're implementing summer program, but really the intentionality behind how you structure that day one and week one really sets you up to be successful. And my colleague Brenda just chatted a tool and a resource that we've used, which can really help you in some of that backwards planning, looking at what you should be considering for that day one, week one, and what does that mean for right now in January and things that should be taken into consideration. How are you assessing? So right now, what is your evaluation plan? How are you going to be collecting information, progress towards goals, both to inform immediate adjustments during the summer program, but also, so at the close of summer, you're able to really reflect and look at, where were their successes? What might be opportunities for growth in the next year? And how does that then take you back into the planning process for the next summer? So all of these are things that, go into the planning process. And again, really are not only step one, but really that engine that drives the entire quality improvement process when we talk about summer learning. So on the next slide, in the RAND study, there was a couple of challenges and promising activities that came out. Some of them we've already highlighted, really, not understanding, budget or budgetary constraints. That planning time, again, we're going to keep emphasizing it. It's a theme today. Thinking about staffing, which I know is something that is really top of mind with everyone right now, given teacher burnout, everything that's really happening with the climate, and then school year challenges. When we think about, though, promising activities that are coming out of this, again, what brings us here today, really starting the planning process early. So identifying someone who really can take the lead on the planning and really drive the summer learning planning, but also someone who's able to engage a larger district leadership and really create a cross-functional representation to support the summer planning. When we think about summer learning, it really is like planning, launching, and closing down a school in a very short period of time. So having that cross-functional representation is really going to make sure that you have effective practices, holistic view, and really that everyone is bought into the program. Making sure that you have a dedicated calendar and meetings that are really driving along the student process. And in doing that, first and foremost, really coming up with your program vision and goals so that you can also really determine what students you're targeting, how you are going to be, again, assessing them, evaluating what are the activities that you want to put into place, what are partnerships that might be needed, again, going to what we'll be talking about on January 25th, and really thinking about how you're able to leverage the strengths and assets that you have in your LEA to really drive towards your vision and goals. And we actually have developed another tool, a needs assessment that Brenda has already shared. And even though we're calling it a needs assessment, again, it's not only there, and we do suggest you use that collectively as a team, but to identify where there may be opportunities for additional support, but really what are the assets that you have to utilize and bring into the summer learning process to really lead to those quality learning experiences that you're hoping and that really speak to your vision, the goals and priorities that you've put forward. So right now, we're going to go and launch a couple of other poll questions just to get a sense of where everyone currently is in their planning process. And so we have here, where are you in the planning process? So, have you not started at all? Early stages, strong planning, where are people right now? The math teacher in me is just like loving all of how this is changing and the different, the way this is scoping out. Okay, we have a lot of people in the early stages, some that have, some really, have really been knee deep in the planning for a little bit, and then we have some who have not started yet, and that's fine. We are here to support everyone for where they are. I think we have another question. Here we go. So this is actually aligned to a little bit of the needs assessment that we shared, but curious, what are your top 3 categories for your greatest needs when it comes to design? Okay, so we have some, I'm seeing evaluation and program goals kind of go up and down, culture, climate, funding and sustainability. Okay, so we have nice representation, a little bit heavier on the design and evaluation. And again, we've got you guys covered. Okay. Now, same question, but now we're talking about operations. So we have sort of 3 larger buckets: design, operations, and instruction and engagement, each with their own individual subcategories. So now we're in operations. This is really the stuff where you're putting the rubber to the road, the logistics, like how are you planning for implementation? Staff and PD. I really wish I had things like this when I was in the classroom. Again, like the math teacher in me is really loving like all of the numbers going up and down. Okay, so yeah, it looks like staffing and PD is really rising to the top, along with maybe some considerations for staffing models, recruitment, enrollment. People seem to feel good about scheduling. That's positive. Great. And so our last category, instruction and engagement. And so this is a little broader, again, to Alea's earlier question. We know some are going to be more enrichment focused, some academic focused, SEL, some people are putting a little bit of everything, but really this is the category that is, what are those student facing, youth facing materials and activities? How are people feeling about those? Okay, instructional design. So a little bit more of an even split here, which makes sense given the variety of programs that I think we have represented here today on the webinar. Great. Well, thank you all so much for participating in the poll. And so now I believe we are going to be teeing up for some breakout rooms where, as we talked about earlier, will be the opportunity to connect with us who have been your hosts, but also more importantly with each other to have some discussions. So in breakout room number 1 is we haven't started planning yet. And really this room is going to focus on really how to structure and engage your planning team, as well as thinking about considerations as you move into the visioning process and how to identify priorities moving forward. Room 2, these are for those in the early planning stages, and this is going to be very discussion based about identifying where you are in the planning process, current successes, challenges, as well as a discussion about really how best to move forward given your priorities, your assets, and your needs. Breakout room number 3, for those who have a strong planning process in place, this will be an opportunity to really share best practices, hear from your peers, just a really collaborative, open discussion about, what has been working, what are next steps, and what's leading towards those quality summer learning experiences. And then our last breakout room is our drop-in, our office hours. And so these are really for implementation questions, technical related questions, might not have a direct answer, but, really a place to sort of raise these questions, open the discussion, and an opportunity for us to keep these things in mind as we move into future webinars in this series. And thank you. I believe Alea just chatted out the rooms. And now we will go ahead and be moving into them.
Where, you didn't have to set up a competitive environment.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for that little recap, and something that I'm taking away that from just my short time popping in to the group is that folks are doing something around planning, and that's really fantastic. We know that there's so much that folks are juggling right now, and so continue what you're doing and join us for future sessions so that we can dig into some of these issues, especially, that were raised up around staffing, around kind of engaging and enrichment opportunities. This is all super helpful that can help inform our future sessions. So great. Thanks, Jess and Brenda and Paige, for facilitating. We didn't have any hardball technical questions that were lobbed at our office hours room. So that's great. And then I had a really wonderful conversation with our partners over at the Missouri After School Network to talk about how, some of these planning resources for summer might be shared across the state lines too. So great. We will then wrap up with just a few reminders about our future summer game plan sessions. Again, join us in a couple of weeks for our session on program planning and integrating partners and thinking about creative partnerships for our summer programs. We will set the date and send it out as soon as possible for our February session around creative staff recruitment strategies. That session we're planning sort of as like a mini conference, if you will. So folks will have a couple of opportunities to hear from and engage with different creative staffing partnerships, like our community colleges, our local workforce boards, hear from some models of employing high school students to work in a program. So we're really trying to bring together some creative, innovative ideas to help address some of our staffing challenges, find a lot more resources, planning tools, and so on at that website as well. I think we have a slide as another reminder for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Planning Workshop next week, which we will make sure you can register at, or hopefully you've already seen the information come from the California After School Network, or CCEE. And then finally, we have a short survey. We really appreciate your feedback. We do look at it. It does help us plan for future workshops. So we really appreciate you completing that feedback survey and taking just a few minutes to respond. And with that, thank you so much for joining us today. Especially thank you for the work that you're doing every day in this moment, yesterday, today, and into the future, navigating the climate and the context that we're in, and still showing up and gaining resources and support to plan your summer work. So thank you, and we hope you join us at a future session.